Hello, creative writing. This lesson is for Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. And today I'm going to be doing a lesson on point of view, and then you'll be doing a writing prompt. I've got two options for you. One of them is based on yesterday's lesson, and one of them is based on the lesson that you're doing today. So choose the one that's more interesting for you and write for 15 minutes after going through this lesson. All right. So this is one of your prompts. The reason I put it at the beginning is because it's connected to yesterday's lesson. So use the 5 senses to spice up one of these sentences and write an entire paragraph. She always stands up for herself, even when she's wrong. The ocean is powerful and endless, but also beautiful, I think it says. Oh, peaceful. My grandma is like super old. He never sleeps. So remember those examples that we went through yesterday? Like my father hated noise, but instead it was this more detailed showing versus telling. I would challenge you to do that with one or two of these examples as you write for 15 minutes. The other option for the writing prompt is at the end of today's lesson. All right. So this lesson is called Give Me Some Perspective, Understanding Points of View in Fiction. So the first thing to understand and to determine point of view, whether you are reading a text or writing a text, is understanding the narrator. What is the narrator and what are their jobs? Notice that there are multiple jobs that a narrator might have. You also want to pay attention to what the motives of the narrator are. A narrator isn't always going to be trustworthy. We know this from certain shows that we've watched. Maybe I don't want to give anything away, but I think it's old now. But like Mr. Robot or Fight Club. All right, your narrator isn't necessarily always reliable. They serve another purpose. So think about, why is the narrator telling the story? When in time are they telling the story? Are they living it in the present? Are they telling it because they've already experienced it? Or what is the current life situation of the narrator? Another great example, if you've ever read the book Supermarket by Logic, that is an example of another really unique narrating situation. But ultimately, how trustworthy is the narrator? That's really important to keep in mind, and that's one of the biggest effects that you're going to have on point of view. Another thing you want to think about when creating a narrator is, how much do you want them to know? Do you want them to know everything? Do you want them to have some limited access to thoughts, what they witness, and backstory? Or should the reader end up knowing more? Is there some dramatic irony that you can play with? Because dramatic irony is when the audience knows more than the narrator, or than the people in the story or experiencing the plot. Really good example of that is horror films. When we can kind of see the axe murderer or monster or whatever hiding behind the couch, but the person sitting on the couch has no idea it's there. And so you get really concerned for them. You start telling them to leave, leave, leave. And of course they don't. So that's an example of dramatic irony. So it's important to remember that there's always a narrator, even if the story appears objective. Okay, somebody is telling the story. Even if it feels like it's the author, there's still a unique perspective or point of view that has been chosen, which means there's a narrator. So different points of view, this is going to be review, of course, you know these already, but we're talking about them in terms of constructing a story, which might be a different lens that you are learning them through. So of course, there's first, second, and third person points of view, and the way that I like to think about these is through camera angles. So first person point of view is probably the most popular with new writers. Person direct, person is involved in the narrative, or detached, the person is telling you about what happened. I would say that first person direct is probably the most popular writing style for new writers. It feels easier to give details. It's easier to be able to include thoughts. A little bit less dialogue is necessary. And of course, it's important to write about what you know. And so first person is the easiest way to do that. There's certainly nothing wrong with doing it this way. It's just the most popular. So this is an example of first person direct. Oopsies. Technical difficulties even at home, folks. So this is from the movie Shawshank Redemption, of course. We have Red, who narrates the movie, and Red is a direct narrator because he's living the experience as he tells it. He was a part of it. So he's more reliable because he was present for it. So that's a choice that he makes. So he watches when the main character actually joins the story and tells us about him rather than the main character telling us the story, which is really interesting. Detached is going to be more like Nick in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Nick is a part of the story, but he's not an important part of it, and he's telling it from the future into the past. So he detaches himself a little bit more from the narrative and really focuses more on the story between Gatsby and Daisy. There are limitations to the first person perspective. First of all, everything becomes lensed through the narrator. And so narrators are going to have limitations, such as simple as geographic. They can't be in every single place at once. Temporal or time, physical, intellectual, experiential, moral, spiritual, and emotional. Every narrator is a unique human being or a unique person with a personality, beliefs, morals, and those are going to create biases that then change the story and how it's told. Everybody has a different perspective. So you want to make sure that the narrator that you construct, if you are doing first person, is representing the perspective of the story that you want to create. Second person is the you voice. This is far less common in writing, but it can be really effective. The example I, of course, give is Ferris Bueller, who speaks to the camera quite often in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you haven't seen that movie, go watch it during quarantine. It's a classic. So you makes the reader a character. It stops the text and refers directly to the reader. It's a specific character within the text, and you is actually the first person. So it can be really interesting to talk directly to your reader. This is another thing that actually happens in the novel Supermarket, which makes the writing style very unique and really, really cool for a first novel by that author. Third person is probably the most freeing style of writing. It's the most complex. The narrator is a disembodied storyteller who never directly appears in the text as a character, and they just have more access to the story depending on the limitations that you give third person narrator. But it's kind of this all-seeing eye. It allows you to be a little bit more detached and tell the complete story from multiple perspectives. So third person objective is like a fly on the wall. Third person objective, they can only report what they see and hear. If they can tell what a character is thinking or feeling, they're not truly objective. So objective is like, in terms of a camera angle, you are literally just recording what's in front of you. It's like a reality television show. We don't know what they're thinking. We are just simply reporting what is being said out loud and interpreting it ourselves. Limited is one step up. They focus on one character and know their thoughts and feelings. Of course, I'm going to use Harry Potter as an example. Sometimes J.K. Rowling plays with limited third-person point of view in her stories, and suddenly, we're learning about Voldemort or a different character, and Harry's not even there. But 95% of the time, we are hearing Harry's thoughts and seeing everything through Harry's eyes. That's limited. And omniscient is God. Omniscient gives you lots and lots of freedom to explore different times, places, characters, everything. But it can also be really complicated to write an omniscient because you are supposed to know everything. But it can be really fun. So omniscient is God, omni, all. So that was kind of quick, but it's review. Some of you have a preferred writing style and narration that you like to do, but I'm going to challenge you today to switch it up. So again, you get to choose between the prompts. The first one was about detail, and the second one is point of view. So changing the point of view can dramatically affect material. No, not just the pronouns, what is observed, interpreted, and shared as truth. I want you to pick an incident that happened to you in the past month or so, something that is stuck in your mind, although for what reason you're not quite sure. Rather than telling that story in first person and just assuming that's how you would tell it, I also want you to tell the story in second and third person. So that is going to potentially change how that story is told. And I think you're quickly going to see how different and how impactful narration can be. Challenge you to do that. You, remember, have a revised writing prompt, which is due on Thursday. I hope that's right. I think it's right. And next week, you're going to be revising a second prompt. So maybe this is one that you revise for next week. All right, that's it. Until tomorrow.